In the icy void of the nebula verge, the Pax Eterna space station hums with tension as humanity's fragile peace, with alien empires shatters. The Klytherans, ruthless insectoid overlords, butcher Earth's diplomats aboard the Dove's Cry, igniting a galactic firestorm. What begins as a desperate plea for diplomacy spirals into a war of vengeance, unveiling humanity's hidden might. Dive into this epic tale of betrayal and triumphing on. Then, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more captivating videos and to inspire us to create even more amazing content. The Pax Eterna drifted silently in the cold expanse of the nebula verge. The enormous space station, an artificial city that had orbited neutral space for decades, was a monument to uneasy diplomacy, a gargantuan structure spanning 40 kilometers in diameter. It was filled with delegates from the galaxy's most powerful species, the Klytherans, the Zellari, the Torvax, the Kix, and, as of the last 5 years, humanity, a fragile alliance bound by mutual distrust. The Interstellar Pact was a reluctant peacekeeping force in the galaxy's endless cycles of war. In the Pact's grand assembly chamber, species from distant star systems sat in uneasy silence, watching as the latest dispute over the asteroid belt and the nebula verge was discussed. The room, cold and imposing with its sleek metal walls, glimmered under the ambient light of 1,000 stars. At the center of the table sat Commander Zekather of the Klytheran Dominion, a towering insectoid figure. His mandibles twitched with disdain as his multifaceted eyes scanned the room. "We are dealing with insignificant rocks," Zekather hissed in his chittering, resonant voice, his mandibles clicking. "The nebula verge belongs to us. It is ours to dissect, to claim." His voice echoed, filling the chamber with venomous certainty. The Klytherans had ruled this part of the galaxy for centuries. To them, the tiny asteroids were no more than a collection of biological experiments waiting to be dissected and harvested. Ambassador Elena Clark, the head of the human delegation, remained calm as she listened. She was human, shorter than most of the other representatives, her skin marked with the faint scars of past conflicts. But there was a resolve in her stance that made even the most cynical alien pause. In her crisp black suit, she appeared almost out of place among the other species, with their biomechanical bodies and organic machinery. But she was every bit as formidable. The Interstellar Pact was created to prevent exactly this kind of aggression, Commander Zekather. Clark's voice cut through the room. "We need a peaceful resolution to this. The asteroid belt can be shared." The Klytherans responded with mocking laughter, their mandibles clicking in a harsh, unsettling rhythm. "Share? Humans still believe in sharing? Pathetic." Her eyes narrowed, but she kept her voice steady. "We sent an unarmed ship, the Dove's Cry, with 15 of our best diplomats. It's a gesture of goodwill." Zekather's eyes glittered with cruel amusement. "A gesture of foolishness, then." The atmosphere thickened with tension. Other species shifted uneasily in their seats. The humans were naive, seen as little more than an inconvenience. Their advanced technology, so often mocked by the larger empires, was still new. Even their weapons, capable of sending shockwaves through entire star systems, were nothing compared to the Klytherans' bioengineered dreadnoughts, capable of deploying clouds of toxic spores to obliterate whole planetary populations. Yet, humanity's newest technological breakthrough, quantum propulsion, was the very reason they had joined the Pact. They had the potential to alter the balance of power in the galaxy. Their ships, built with cutting-edge, stealth technology, could disappear into the depths of space, moving faster than any ship before. But in this room, their power was still an unknown to many. "Consider this," Clark pressed. "The Dove's Cry represents everything humanity has fought for: unity, diplomacy, peace. You will regret disregarding that." The Klytheran commander's mandibles twitched again, a sign of the growing impatience beneath his icy exterior. "Humans are nothing but dirt-born apes. You would do well to remember your place in the universe." As the diplomatic debate continued to swirl around them, the eyes of the room now rested on the humans. Their resolve, their technology, and their potential were suddenly far more than just idle chatter. The die had been cast, though no one knew yet how soon the universe would feel its weight. The dove's cry glided through the void, its sleek form a testament to humanity's technological ingenuity. A symbol of peace, the unarmed ship, no larger than a Klytheran dreadnought's control tower, cut through the nebulous expanse of the verge. Its hull, made from a newly developed quantum alloy, shimmered faintly under the distant light of a dying star, almost indistinguishable from the surrounding cosmic dust. Inside, 15 of humanity's finest diplomats sat quietly in the observation lounge, their eyes fixed on the holographic star maps as they awaited arrival at the asteroid belt. But peace, as it always seemed, was fleeting. In the vast emptiness of the verge, the dove's cry was an easy target for the Klytheran Dominion. The Klytheran fleet had been lying in wait, their bioengineered ships already positioned to intercept and neutralize any unwelcome vessels. As the dove's cry entered the proximity of the first asteroid, its sensors detected a massive presence. A Klytheran dreadnought, looming at 7 kilometers in length, emerged from the nebula, flanked by 5 smaller bioships. The Klytherans had been patient, confident that the humans would come, so sure of their dominance that they hadn't even bothered to cloak their ships. The dove's cry had no defenses, no weapons to retaliate. It was just a diplomatic mission, a message. But the Klytherans saw it as a challenge. Commander Zekathar's fleet struck swiftly. The larger Klytheran dreadnought, Vaktor, extended its claws, engineered to rip apart ships 3 times the size of the dove's cry. As its crew activated an energy beam that shot out in a blistering arc, the beam slammed into the ship's side, cracking the alloy and sending a ripple through the hull. Inside the ship, the diplomats were thrown into chaos. Alarms blared and the lights flickered. The crew scrambled to their stations, but there was no hope of escape. The ship's defensive systems were a mere shadow of what was needed. Despite the dove's cry's cutting-edge quantum propulsion, there was no way to outrun a dreadnought of that size. Zekathar's voice echoed through the communication channel. This ship, this insult, will be eradicated. You will not leave this place alive. The Klytheran ships closed in. The diplomats, veterans of Earth's long history of war, knew the odds were slim, but they faced their doom with the same calm resolve that had brought humanity to the negotiating table. Still, there was a glimmer of hope. The dove's cry carried a hidden weapon, one that had never been deployed in combat before, designed specifically to protect Earth's most valuable assets in case of extreme provocation. But it wasn't enough to save them now. For 48 hours, the Klytherans kept the diplomats trapped aboard the dove's cry, using specialized tools to forcibly extract information, tearing apart both of the ship's systems and the human bodies within. The broadcasts of their agony were a calculated effort to break humanity's resolve. Klytheran PSYOPs teams reveled in their cruelty, sending the screams out across the galaxy through subspace frequencies, hoping to spread fear. But it only sparked rage. Humanity would not bend, would not break. After the final transmission, Zekathar's fleet moved to disengage. Satisfied with their grotesque display, they returned the remains of the diplomats in gleaming cryotubes, each labeled with a mocking message, substandard subjects. As the tubes drifted silently through space, heading toward Terra Prom, the Klytherans did not know what they had just unleashed. On Terra Prom, the people watched in horror as the broadcast from the dove's cry was played in every corner of the Earth. It was a gruesome, visceral reminder of the stakes in this galactic war. The images were brutal, human bodies suspended in cryotubes, their eyes forever closed, a symbol of a species brutalized. The Klytherans had crossed a line, and humanity's response would be swift. The first wave of protests began in New Geneva, Earth's political capital, with thousands gathering in the streets, chanting for retribution. Over the next few hours, the numbers grew to millions. Calls for vengeance echoed across every major city. 93% of humanity's population demanded blood. The unity forged through Earth's unification wars had not dissipated. It had only grown stronger in the face of unimaginable horror. Within minutes of the news, Admiral Kara Voss, commander of the United Earth Fleet and a survivor of the Lunar Rebellion, stood before her team. Her voice was a low growl, filled with barely contained fury. "They sent us guts in boxes. We're done talking." Humanity was no longer looking for a diplomatic solution. They were looking for war. The news hit Terra Prime like a tidal wave, crashing through the global channels and spreading across every dome and cityscape. The dove's cry, humanity's hope for peaceful diplomacy, had been destroyed. The unarmed vessel, carrying 15 of humanity's finest diplomats, had been intercepted, captured, and vivisected by the Klytheran Dominion. For 48 hours, the galaxy watched in horror as Klytheran forces broadcasted the screams of those brave souls across subspace frequencies. And then, as if mocking their sacrifice, the Klytherans had returned their bodies in cryotubes, labeled with a message, substandard subjects. It was a brutal, cold-blooded act, and the people of Earth were not about to forget it. From the moment the news broke, the streets of New Geneva were filled with rage. Crowds surged, chanting for vengeance, their voices rising into a roar that could be heard from one side of the dome to the other. Tens of thousands of people gathered outside government buildings, burning effigies of Klytheran overlords, their faces twisted in defiance and pain. The footage of the diplomats' torture played on every screen, making the violence personal, turning every human into a participant in this blood-soaked tragedy. "They killed our people. Now, we kill theirs," was the rallying cry that echoed in the streets. It was simple, visceral, and deeply human. By the end of the day, the numbers swelled. From every corner of the planet, from the megacities of Asia to the colonies on Mars, calls for retribution spread like wildfire. A staggering 93% of the global population supported immediate retaliation. There was no room for diplomacy now, not after the barbaric cruelty displayed by the Klytherans. The collective pain turned into a single, unified demand: blood. Inside the war rooms of the United Earth Fleet, Admiral Kara Voss stood, eyes narrowed, watching the chaos unfold. Her face was grim, but there was a glint of something darker in her eyes. She had seen the violence of war before, had fought through the brutal Lunar Rebellion, but this was something else. This was personal. She turned to the council. "They sent us guts in boxes," Voss said, her voice low and cold, "and we're done talking." The fleet's top generals and military leaders didn't hesitate. Orders were already being drafted, ships readied in secret shipyards. New quantum void bombs, humanity's deadliest weapon, capable of creating miniature black holes, were fast-tracked. The same stealth technology that had allowed the dove's cry to slip unnoticed into the Verge would now be used to decimate the Klytheran fleets. Humanity had been pushed too far, and the weight of the coming storm was already shifting in the stars. "Let them laugh now," Voss muttered to herself. "They won't be laughing for long." The walls of the United Earth Fleet's War Council room were lined with holographic star maps, shimmering like constellations in motion. The chamber buzzed with activity as military personnel moved swiftly between terminals, coordinating a vast and unseen operation. Earth's response to the Klytheran atrocity was no longer a matter of if, it was a matter of when and how. Admiral Kara Voss stood at the head of the table, her fingers idly tracing the top of her holomap. Her gaze was unwavering, focused on the threat that loomed over humanity's survival. In the last 72 hours, Earth had gone from a species still learning the delicate art of intergalactic diplomacy to a force bent on retribution. The dove's cry had been humanity's moment of peace, and it had been torn away in the most violent, grotesque fashion imaginable. "We've been underestimated," Voss said, her voice gravelly, barely above a whisper but laced with cold fury. "They thought we were soft, that we were nothing." A low murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Voss wasn't wrong. Humanity had long been considered insignificant by the dominant powers of the galaxy. Even within the Interstellar Pact, their contributions were seen as token, an afterthought. But after the Klytherans' brutality, After the deaths of their diplomats, the entire fabric of human resolve had been torn apart and reforged into something far stronger. The fleet's commanders, engineers, and tacticians gathered in tight formation, eyes locked on the display screens. Earth's hidden war programs, previously known only to a handful of high-ranking officials, were now being activated. Voss turned to one of her engineers. "Where are we on the quantum void bombs?" The technician's hands danced over the controls, and a hologram of a sleek black bomb, no larger than a human torso, materialized in front of them. The bomb could create a miniature singularity, pulling entire ships, up to 6 kilometers long, into a gravitational collapse. Each bomb had a yield that rivaled the power of Earth's original nuclear weapons, but in a form more precise, more devastating. The Klytherans wouldn't even see it coming. "We've finished production on 36 bombs," the technician reported. "They're ready for deployment." Voss nodded, her face unreadable. "Good. We've got a timetable." "We're also ahead on the fleet's stealth warships," another officer chimed in, her voice tight with urgency. "The Zephyr and Dreadfire will be in position within 48 hours. With the new cloaking systems, they'll be able to strike without detection, just like we planned." Voss took in the information, her mind already calculating the next steps. Humanity's quantum propulsion system, capable of moving ships at faster-than-light speeds, was no longer just a curiosity. It was now the backbone of a new fleet that would not just fight the Klytherans, but decimate their entire fleet before they could even react. The War Council moved with deadly precision, the operations unfolding seamlessly. Humanity had only just unlocked its full potential, and now, the galaxy would see what happened when an underestimated species was pushed to the edge. "We strike in 72 hours, Voss declared, her voice firm. "Let them laugh now. They won't be laughing when we're done." The Klytheran fleet hovered in the shadow of the nebula verge, a dark cloud of organic dreadnoughts and bioengineered ships, all pulsating with the sickly green glow of their monstrous reactors. The Victor, flagship of the Dominion, sat at the center, a grotesque leviathan over 7 kilometers long, its hull a network of tendrils, capable of ripping apart entire fleets with its razor-sharp claws. Commander Zekather, the highest-ranking officer of the Klytheran fleet, stood at the command bridge, his insectoid eyes glinting with anticipation as he watched the human response unfold. Through subspace feeds, the Klytherans had won. They had destroyed humanity's symbol of peace, and with it, the remaining threads of human diplomacy. Their victory was not just in the blood of the diplomats, but in the humiliation they had caused. The screams of their victims echoed in Zekather's mind, a reminder that the ape species had been crushed, rendered insignificant in the eyes of the galaxy. At least, that's what he believed. Zekather sneered as he looked over the diplomatic messages from Terra Prime, now flooded with angry demands for retribution. "Pathetic," he muttered. "They think they can challenge us." The Klytheran Dominion's military strength was unquestionable. They controlled 19 star systems, their bioships bred for combat, their dreadnoughts capable of wiping out entire cities with their chemical weaponry and corrosive firestorms. Against such overwhelming force, humanity, with its fragile ships and primitive weapons, was inconsequential, an annoying gnat to swat away. But Zekather's confidence soon shifted as he noticed a troubling message flicker. On his command console, an encrypted transmission, human military signatures. The message was brief. "We are coming." "They are bold," Zekather mused aloud, his mandibles clicking in amusement. "But we will break them, just as we did with the dove's cry." The Klytherans laughed, high-pitched, cruel cackles that filled the command bridge. The other officers joined in, their mirth spreading like a contagious disease. But beneath that laughter, there was an unease. Humanity's reaction was unlike anything the Klytherans had anticipated. They had expected fear, maybe a call for more diplomacy. Instead, the humans were talking of war, and that was a problem. While Zekather reveled in his apparent victory, the Klytheran fleet remained unaware of the storm that was rapidly forming in the depths of space. They had underestimated humanity, again. What they didn't know was that the humans had no intention of fighting on their terms. The stealth warships, cloaked and ready, were already within 48 hours of striking, their quantum propulsion systems ready to deliver a devastating blow. The Klytherans had underestimated humanity's resilience. They would soon learn how dangerous an underestimated species could be. And when the time came, the Klytherans would realize just how wrong they were about their dirt-born apes. Beneath the surface of Terra Prime, in the vast, hidden shipyards of Earth's most secure facilities, a transformation was underway. The Klytherans' brutal execution of the Dove's Cry had not just lit a fire under humanity. It had ignited an inferno of ingenuity and resolve. The world's brightest minds, once focused on peaceful advancement, now turned all their energy to war. And with it, they began to craft weapons and ships that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. Admiral Kara Voss stood at the heart of the war effort, her sharp eyes scanning the holographic data display before her. Her war room was a controlled chaos of screens, holograms, and flashing red alerts. But her focus was razor sharp. Across her desk, various tech experts and military commanders briefed her on the progress of Earth's new fleet. We're 72 hours from full deployment, Lieutenant Commander Torres reported, his voice steady despite the weight of the situation. The stealth warships, Zephyr and Dreadfire, are in their final stages. The cloaking tech is holding up. I don't expect any problems. The Zephyr and Dreadfire were not just ships. They were humanity's answer to the Klytheran arrogance. Armed with quantum propulsion and the most advanced cloaking systems Earth had ever developed, these ships were designed to strike without warning, with surgical precision. Built from the newly synthesized quantum alloys that had been developed over the last decade, the ships could slip through enemy lines unnoticed, their hulls impervious to the most common forms of detection. They were the epitome of human engineering, a brutal response to the Klytherans' belief that humanity was still in its infancy. Voss nodded, her jaw clenched in a silent vow. Good. We'll need every advantage we can get. What about the quantum void bombs? The technician at the far side of the room, eyes focused intently on his console, spoke up. Production is ahead of schedule. We've got 36 fully functional bombs, each with the power to create a singularity strong enough to crush ships, up to 6 kilometers in length. We've adapted the Vesuvius-class warheads for subspace detonation. They'll tear through the Klytheran fleet with zero chance of escape. The warheads were humanity's deadliest innovation, built with precision. Each quantum void bomb could create a micro-black hole that would devour anything within a 500-meter radius, annihilating entire formations of enemy ships in seconds. The potential for destruction was nearly limitless. But Voss's expression remained hard, the weight of command pressing down on her shoulders. Are we still on track with the Alliance? She asked, turning her gaze to another officer. Everything's in place, the officer confirmed. The Zilari are finalizing their stealth technology for the auxiliary fleet. The Torvax are sending over gravity warp generators for our assault ships, and the Kicks will be providing the crystalline weaponry for our frontline ships. We've got a unified fleet ready to deploy. The Klytherans won't even know what hit them. The alliance with the Zilari, Torvax, and Kicks had been born out of necessity. Each of these species had unique abilities and technologies that, when combined, would give humanity the leverage needed to crush the Klytheran war machine. The Zilari's mastery of cloaking and stealth tech made them the perfect covert strike partners. The Torvax's ability to manipulate gravity allowed humanity's ships to unleash hell with pinpoint accuracy, and the Kicks, creatures of pure crystalline energy, provided devastating weapons that could destabilize even the most reinforced ships. Voss stood back from the map, her eyes narrowing as she considered the upcoming assault. The Klytherans had no idea what was coming. To them, humanity was nothing but a minor inconvenience, a species far below their level, unable to compete with the mighty bioengineered fleet that controlled 19 star systems. But now, the galaxy would see what happened when humans were pushed to the brink. The Klytherans think they have already won, Voss said, her voice hard. They've made a mistake. We'll show them what happens when you underestimate humanity. We've danced with extinction before. We have survived. And now, we will make them regret ever crossing us." She turned and addressed her team, the weight of their collective knowledge in every word. "Prepare for launch in 48 hours. Let's show them our wrath. Let's show them that humanity doesn't back down." The War Council moved with efficiency, but a new energy had taken root. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival. They were fighting to make a statement. Never again would they be underestimated. And the Klytherans were about to learn what it truly meant to provoke a species that had survived the worst of itself. In the cold, empty void of space, the human fleet moved silently, its ships cloaked and undetected, a phantom force that seemed to materialize out of nothing. The Zephyr and Dreadfire led the charge, their sleek forms barely visible against the swirling backdrop of the nebula verge. Each warship was equipped with the latest in stealth technology, holographic shields and quantum cloaks that bent light around them, making them invisible to the Klytherans' most advanced scanning systems. Humanity's fleet had transformed from a symbol of diplomacy into an unstoppable force, and now, the time had come to strike. Admiral Kara Voss stood at the helm of the flagship Vindication, her face illuminated only by the soft blue glow of the ship's command console. The Vindication was one of the first vessels to be fully outfitted with the new gravity warp generators that the Torvax had provided. It had the ability to manipulate gravitational fields, pulling enemy ships off course or crushing them with a sudden spike in gravity. A devastatingly powerful weapon that had been perfected in secrecy, now ready for battle. "Ready the quantum void bombs," Voss ordered, her voice calm, but filled with an intensity that cut through the tension in the room. "We make our move now." The order was echoed throughout the fleet. The human ships, now fully operational, had been split into 3 waves. The first wave, including the Zephyr and Dreadfire, would infiltrate the Klytheran fleet undetected. The second wave would be the main assault, deploying the quantum void bombs and gravity warp generators to cripple the Klytheran armada. The final wave was for pursuit. If the Klytherans dared to flee, humanity would ensure they had no place to hide. Admiral Voss's finger hovered over the release button. Her eyes flickered over the data streaming from the ships in real time. The Klytheran fleet was still unaware of the impending threat, their dreadnoughts patrolling the asteroid belt with arrogance as if victory was already theirs. The Klytherans had no idea that they were about to be blindsided by a species they had dismissed as weak. At precisely 0300 hours, Voss gave the command, "Initiate strike." The first wave of ships materialized out of the cloak-like specters from a nightmare. Within seconds, the Zephyr and Dreadfire had breached the Klytheran perimeter, their advanced cloaking systems allowing them to slip past even the most sensitive detection grids. On board, the crews worked swiftly, launching the first volley of attacks. The Zephyr's main cannon, charged with crystalline energy from the kicks, fired with a deadly hum, sending a concentrated bolt of energy into the side of a Klytheran destroyer. The ship disintegrated instantly, a brilliant flash of light that lit up the void. Within moments, the Dreadfire followed suit, its anti-matter torpedoes hitting a Klytheran cruiser dead-on. The explosion was nothing short of magnificent, a star exploding in miniature, sending shockwaves across the empty void. The Klytheran fleet scrambled, their fleets now vulnerable, their arrogance shattered. For the first time in decades, they were fighting an enemy that didn't hesitate, an enemy that was as unforgiving as they were ruthless. As the second wave of ships engaged, Voss stood silently, watching the battle unfold on the holo screens. The first quantum void bomb was deployed, a sleek black orb shot out from the Vindication, disappearing into the blackness of space. Moments later, the explosion tore through the Klytheran formation, creating a micro-black hole that swallowed entire ships. The Victor, flagship of the Klytheran fleet, was among the first to fall. The bomb's gravitational pull was too powerful, pulling the dreadnought apart piece by piece, its bioengineered hull crumbling under the weight of its own destruction. Admiral Zekather, watching from the command bridge of the Victor, couldn't believe his eyes. His fleet, his pride, was being torn apart, and he hadn't even seen the attack coming. The human strike was calculated, precise, and devastating. Humanity's technology was like nothing the Klytherans had ever encountered. They had been the hunters for so long, but now they were the prey. Zikathar's mandibles clicked in fury, his mind racing to comprehend the magnitude of the loss. His fleet, once thought invincible, was being reduced to space debris. Ships disintegrated one after another, torn apart by quantum explosions and gravity warp-induced collapse. The Klytherans' superior firepower meant nothing against the combined might of human ingenuity. And their alien allies, the Zephyr and Dreadfire, circled the battlefield like predators, striking with deadly efficiency. They deployed additional quantum void bombs, each detonating with catastrophic results. By the time the third wave arrived, the Klytheran fleet was in disarray, struggling to maintain any semblance of order. Zikathar's voice crackled through the comms, but it was too late. "We're not finished yet," he hissed, his voice a mix of rage and disbelief. But his words were lost in the void, drowned out by the relentless onslaught of humanity's fury. Admiral Voss stood, watching as the final Klytheran ships burned. The quiet of space was broken only by the sound of her steady breath. The strike had been swift, but it had sent a clear message. Humanity had arrived, and the galaxy would never forget the lesson learned that day. Never underestimate the species that had survived its darkest moments and had emerged from them stronger than ever. The silence that followed the destruction of the Klytheran fleet was suffocating, almost unnatural. The stars around the debris field of shattered ships and floating wreckage burned brightly. But to Admiral Kara Voss, it was the silence that was the loudest. The Klytherans, once so sure of their superiority, were now reeling. Their mighty dreadnoughts had been reduced to floating carcasses, their bioengineered vessels torn apart by the quantum void bombs and time matter lances. Humanity had unleashed. Voss stood at the helm of the Vindication, the flagship that had led humanity's charge, eyes cold and unblinking as she surveyed the aftermath. The battle had been swift, efficient, and devastating. The human fleet, reinforced by their alien allies, had inflicted damage on a scale that left the Klytherans no room for reprisal. "Status report," Voss ordered, her voice steady but sharp. A technician quickly brought up a map of the battlefield. It showed the Klytheran fleet in total disarray. Of the 19 warships that had initially engaged, only 4 remained, and they were already in retreat. The others had been either destroyed or disabled beyond repair. The Vaktor, flagship of the Klytheran Armada, had been reduced to a mass of smoldering debris, its remains floating in space like a testament to humanity's newfound might. "Admiral," Lieutenant Commander Torres reported, his face tense. "The remaining Klytheran ships are attempting to regroup, but they're scattered. They're not in any condition to retaliate." Voss's eyes narrowed. "Don't let them regroup. We've finished this now." The human fleet moved with lethal precision. The second wave of ships, led by the Zephyr and Dreadfire, continued to sweep through the remnants of the Klytheran defenses. The Zalari stealth tech allowed them to strike from the shadows, while the Torvak's gravity warp generators rendered the Klytheran attempts to regroup hopeless. Ships were torn apart by sudden shifts in gravity, some imploding on themselves, others ripped to pieces by sudden bursts of pressure. The Kix's crystalline weaponry pulsed through the battlefield, destabilizing anything in its path. It wasn't just the sheer firepower that overwhelmed the Klytherans. It was the synergy of humanity and its allies. The Zephyr's cloaking systems allowed it to strike unseen, launching time matter torpedoes with pinpoint accuracy. The Dreadfire's gravity warp generator, used in concert with the Zalari stealth technology, turned the very battlefield into a weapon. The Klytherans, who had once considered themselves the apex predators, now found themselves prey. In the command center of the Vindication, Voss monitored the progress. Her face was stoic, but the weight of the moment was not lost on her. She had led humanity's military efforts through the brutal lunar rebellion and had seen the darkest parts of war. But this This was different. This was the moment that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. "Admiral," said Lieutenant Commander Morrow, one of her senior officers, "the Klytherans are attempting to surrender. Zekather has sent a message. He's asking for terms." Voss's lips curled into a thin smile, though there was no humor in it. "Terms? They should have thought of that before they butchered our people. No terms. We'll give them one choice." She turned to her comm officer. "Prepare the message. We're sending them a simple ultimatum." The comm officer nodded, typing swiftly. On the holo screen, a broadcast went out across subspace frequencies, reaching every corner of the galaxy. The message was short, direct, and unmistakable. "Surrender now, or face annihilation. You have no fleet left to fight. We've only just begun. This is 10 from of our wrath. Imagine the rest." The message hit like a shockwave, reverberating through Klytheran command centers. Zekather, still reeling from the scale of humanity's assault, listened to the message in stunned silence. His once proud fleet lay in ruins, and he now understood humans were not the naive, weak species they had believed them to be. As the Klytheran fleet began to disband, broken and scattered, the human forces closed in. The battle was over, but the war, humanity's war to prove that they would never again be underestimated, was far from finished. Humanity had delivered a message, one that would echo across the galaxy for centuries. It wasn't just about victory. It was about showing the universe that humans, when pushed, were a force of nature. They had survived extinction before, and now they would survive as the baddest bastards the galaxy had ever known. The void of space stretched endless and dark beyond the shattered remnants of the Klytheran fleet. The stars, cold and distant, watched in silence as humanity's ships closed in. They were the predators now, circling their prey. The Klytherans, once so confident, now had nowhere to hide. Admiral Kara Voss stood at the helm of the Vindication, her eyes scanning the battlefield. Calculating, her fleet was victorious. The Klytheran dreadnoughts lay in pieces, their advanced bioships no match for the combined power of humanity's technological might. The quantum void bombs had worked flawlessly, tearing through the Klytheran forces with brutal efficiency, while the Gravitae warp generators had ripped their remaining ships apart with unthinkable force. Humanity had proven itself a deadly force, a lesson the galaxy would never forget. But there was one last piece of the puzzle. Zekather. The Klytheran commander had watched his empire burn, his ships disintegrating under humanity's fury. And now, with his fleet in ruins, Zekather was left with no option but to submit. His bioship, a battered husk of its former self, limped into a secure communication zone. And the transmission came through. Zekather's voice crackled across the comms, hoarse with defeat. "Admiral Voss, you have shattered my fleet. You have crushed my people. I surrender. But know this, our defeat is not the end. We will rebuild, and next time, you will not be so fortunate." Voss leaned back in her chair, a cold smile tugging at her lips. The Klytherans thought this was just a setback. They had no idea what humanity had in store. "I don't need your surrender, Zekather," Voss replied, her voice icy and unwavering. "You had a chance to negotiate. You butchered our diplomats. You murdered them in cold blood. Now you face the consequences." Zekather's mandibles clicked in frustration, but his words were empty. There was no bravado left, only the bitter sting of humiliation. "You will live," Voss continued, "but your people will be re-educated. You will have to answer for the atrocities you've committed. I'm not going to destroy your worlds. No, we're better than that. But you will never threaten humanity again." Zekather was silent for a long moment. The weight of his failure hung in the air. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. "What do you want from us? Your compliance, your obedience. You will bow to the Interstellar Pact, or you will face annihilation once more." The transmission cut off abruptly. The Klytheran commander had no more words. Humanity had delivered its verdict, swift, unforgiving, and final. Voss turned to her officers, her face hard as steel. "Prepare the fleet for re-entry into the Pact. We've shown them our wrath, but we chose mercy, and that is what will haunt them. The message was clear. Humanity had proved its strength, but now it was about something far greater, a species that had learned from its past mistakes, a force that did not need to prove its dominance through destruction, but through the power of restraint. The Klytherans would remember the lesson well. Humanity had earned its place in the galaxy. The war was over. The Klytheran fleet, once a titan of the galaxy, now floated in the void, shattered and broken. The stars burned bright above the wreckage, a stark contrast to the silent devastation below. Earth's ships moved through the debris field like predators among their prey, the threat of annihilation hanging in the air. But there was no celebration. The devastation was too deep, too profound, for anything other than resolve. Admiral Kara Voss stood at the command center of the Vindication, watching as the final remnants of the Klytheran fleet retreated into the dark corners of space. The battle had been brutal, but humanity had emerged victorious, the weight of their triumph now carrying a new meaning. It was a victory, yes, but it was also a statement, a message to every species in the galaxy. Admiral, Lieutenant Commander Torres said, breaking the silence. We've received a message from the Interstellar Pact. They want us to attend an emergency session. Voss didn't answer immediately. The Pact, a fragile alliance of species that had once dismissed humanity as weak, now had no choice but to recognize Earth's power. Humanity had fought the war on their own terms, employing technology and tactics no one had anticipated. The Klytherans had been ruthless, but humanity had been precise, swift, relentless. They'll want to discuss terms, Voss said finally. We've shown them our wrath, but it's time they understand that we don't need to prove anything. We've already proven enough. With that, she gave the order to move the fleet toward the Pact's meeting station. The ships, once silent and cloaked in shadow, now moved forward with undeniable confidence. The message was already clear to every race that had watched the Klytheran destruction unfold. Humanity was no longer the underdog. They had taken their place among the most powerful species in the galaxy, not through brute force alone, but by choosing restraint when they could have destroyed everything. The fleet arrived at the Pact station, a massive, spiraling citadel that orbited the contested asteroid belt. The aliens who had once considered humanity a nuisance now regarded them with awe and fear. Voss entered the assembly chamber, her boots echoing against the metal floor. The alien representatives from every corner of the galaxy turned their attention to her, their expressions a mix of disbelief and reverence. She stepped forward, her voice cutting through the silence. "We could have glassed their worlds," she said, her tone firm and unwavering. "But we chose mercy. That's what makes us the baddest bastards in the galaxy, and we don't need to prove it." Her words hung in the air as the assembly of species remained silent, absorbing the magnitude of what had just happened. Humanity had not only won a war, it had redefined its place in the galaxy. Voss turned and walked away, her legacy sealed. The galaxy would remember this day for eons, the day humanity learned how to survive and how to conquer with restraint.